Imagine unlocking the mental switch that forces you to act, even when every part of you wants to run, even when the task ahead feels impossible. Picture yourself stepping into the hardest, most intimidating challenges without delay, without bargaining, without the familiar grip of procrastination holding you hostage. That is the power this journey is about, training your mind so hesitation has no room to live. How to Force Yourself to Do Hard Things delivers 10 strategies built to crush resistance at its core. You will learn to hack your thoughts, to interrupt the cycle of doubt the moment it begins, and to move with decisive action. You will discover the secret of micro goals, how the smallest, deliberate step can create unstoppable momentum that snowballs into massive achievement. You will learn to leverage discomfort, turning pressure into fuel rather than paralysis, and to ritualize toughness until resilience is not a choice, but your default state. Accountability will become your unshakable anchor, the force that drags you forward when willpower alone is weak. Visualization will sharpen your direction, carving victory into your mind until success feels inevitable. You will master your energy, not just your time, so the hours you invest burn hotter, sharper, and with greater focus. You will reward hard work the right way, so effort feeds desire rather than drains it. And you will face fear head-on, not waiting for it to fade, but acting while it screams, proving to yourself that fear has no authority over your destiny. Each chapter cuts straight to action, giving you the tools to break hesitation and transform struggle into triumph. And the question remains, what is the silent challenge that is draining your potential right now? What is the hidden battle you've delayed fighting? Because the moment you choose to act, the moment you force yourself forward, you begin stacking victories that cannot be undone. On Book Sounds Better You, this message is not theory, it's practice. Every strategy is meant to be lived, tested, and proven in your daily life. This is not motivation that fades. This is discipline that compounds. Your breakthrough begins here, and once it starts, it won't let you quit. Chapter 1. Hack Your Mind. Conquer resistance every day. Every person carries an invisible enemy, a force that rises whenever they decide to do something that matters. It waits at the edge of every meaningful task, whispering to stay comfortable, tugging at your attention, convincing you to wait until tomorrow. It presses on your chest like a stone. It pulls at your mind like gravity. It drains your strength like curtains, shutting out the light of the morning sun. That enemy is not laziness. It is not weakness. It has a name: resistance. Resistance disguises itself as fatigue, distraction, or hesitation, but at its core, it is nothing more than your brain doing exactly what it was built to do, protecting you from risk, change, and effort. Long ago, resistance kept our ancestors alive by steering them away from danger. Today, that same wiring betrays us. It fires when there is no danger, only challenge. It screams when you sit down to create, to train, to build, to grow. And unless you learn to hack it, resistance will decide your future for you. The truth is simple. Resistance cannot be erased, but it can be beaten. It can be redirected, outsmarted, and weakened until it no longer controls your choices. And the way to do it begins with clarity. The brain fears the vague. When goals are unclear, danger signals grow louder. That is why broad intentions, work on my book, exercise more, be productive, collapse before they even begin. They are fog, and fog breeds fear. The cure is sharpness. Replace the haze with precision. Say, write 300 words between 7 and 8 tonight. Say, do a 15-minute workout after dinner. Say, send the email draft before lunch. Resistance shrinks when the mind sees a clear endpoint. Now attack with the 2-minute rule. The hardest part is always the start. Your mind exaggerates the pain of beginning, painting the task as unbearable. Cut it down. Demand only 2 minutes. If even that feels too heavy, ask for 1. Once the first step is taken, momentum takes over. 2 minutes grow into 10, 10 into 30, because motion destroys the illusion of impossibility. Action reshapes expectation faster than thought ever could. Then design the battlefield. The easiest path is always the one you follow, so make the hard thing easy to start and the distractions harder to reach. If writing matters, close every app, silence the phone, block the internet. If training matters, place the shoes by the door, wear the clothes to bed, prepare so thoroughly that doing becomes easier than avoiding. Environment is not decoration, it is strategy. Give your mind patterns it cannot resist. Use implementation intentions. If X, then Y. If the clock strikes 9, then I write for 30 minutes. If I clear the dishes, then I walk for 10. Triggers erase hesitation. The mind loves chains of cause and effect. Give it the chain, and it will obey. When resistance shows up, strip it of its power by naming it. Call it the siren, the couch, the coward, the whisper. Say aloud, the siren is here. By naming it, you make it an object, not an identity. You are not resistance. You are the one facing it. And once you see it for what it is, you are free to act anyway. Shift the story. Stories drive behavior far more than logic. When the mind whispers, "This will be miserable," you must answer with a stronger truth. This will build strength. This will build freedom. This will build dignity. Repeat the script. Short-term discomfort, long-term gain. Over time, the mind learns to expect reward instead of pain. Anchor the start with ritual. Rituals are not superstition. They are neurological shortcuts. Brew the same tea. Take 3 deep breaths. Put on the same song. Repeat it before every session. Ritual is a switch that tells your nervous system, work begins now. Time box your effort. Do not say work for a while. That is endless and unbearable. Instead, 25 minutes of focus, 5 minutes of rest. Use a visible timer. The countdown sharpens focus. The promise of a break persuades the brain to cooperate. Time boxing turns dread into manageable sprints. Train through voluntary discomfort. Cold showers, skipping dessert, walking without your phone. Small hardships harden the mind against the tyranny of comfort. These micro acts of courage build a reservoir of resilience, so when real resistance appears, you are already prepared. Keep a record of proof. Each night, write 3 lines: what you attempted, what you finished, what you learned. This journal becomes evidence. Evidence defeats the lies resistance tells when you feel weak. Over weeks and months, the record becomes undeniable. Add accountability. Say it aloud. Make it public. Tell one person or many, I will finish the draft by Friday. The social cost of failure drives action. Pair accountability with metrics: visible, countable, measurable. Not, I'll exercise more, but I'll train 3 times this week. Metrics make your progress undeniable. When motivation fails, use your body to reset your state. Stand tall, ground your feet, soften your jaw. Take 3 deep release. Posture, breath, and movement alter your hormones and energy. The body leads, the mind follows. Break the mountain into stones. Mammoth tasks paralyze because they seem endless. Divide them. 1 paragraph, 1 scene, 1 page. Each small artifact is proof of progress, and proof keeps momentum alive. Measure what matters. Choose 1 metric per project. Words written, minutes moved, calls made, and track it daily. Simplicity keeps you honest. Numbers erase excuses. Progress becomes real. Reward effort immediately. Do not wait weeks to celebrate. Reward yourself now. A short walk, a favorite drink, a moment of music. Immediate rewards wire your brain to crave effort instead of fearing it. And when fear feels overwhelming, dissect it. Write down the worst-case scenario. Break it apart. Plan prevention. Plan recovery. Almost always, the catastrophe is smaller than the imagination suggests. Fear shrinks when exposed to detail. Above all, commit to the long game. Hacking your mind is not a trick. It is practice. Some days you will be strong, other days weak. Both count. Each choice is a vote. Each action is a step. Over time, those votes carve identity. Those steps create a life built on discipline instead of delay. Begin with a simple 7-day challenge. Day 1, define 1 measurable outcome. Day 2, apply the 2-minute rule. Day 3, alter your environment. Day 4, create your ritual. Day 5, embrace 1 voluntary discomfort. Day 6, record 3 lines and share accountability. Day 7, review and reset micro goals. Discipline is a muscle. Resistance will always return, but each time you breathe, each time you begin, each time you step into action despite the pull of comfort, you become stronger. The chest lightens, the curtains open, the weight lifts. The real hack is not against the mind itself, but against the habit of letting it rule. Decide. Begin. Repeat. That is how resistance is conquered. That is how you win. What if resistance was not your enemy, but your compass? What if every place it showed up, every hesitation, every moment of dread, every excuse that whispered in the back of your mind was not a warning to turn away, but a signal pointing to the very thing that matters most? Imagine living a life where the things you once avoided became the things you now chase, because you know on the other side of resistance lives growth, strength, and freedom. This is the challenge: to stop treating resistance as a wall and start treating it as a guide. To look it in the face and say, you only appear here because this is important. You only fight me here because this is the doorway worth opening. The next chapter will take you directly into that fight. It will not just show you how to push against resistance, but how to make it serve you, how to turn avoidance into direction, fear into focus, struggle into proof. Because the truth is simple, the task you avoid most often is the very task that will transform you. And the moment you decide to face it, you stop living at the mercy of hesitation and start living at the command of purpose. Chapter 2, Micro Goals Strategy. Win hard tasks consistently. The human mind resists large, undefined challenges. They appear like mountains shrouded in fog, massive shapes with no clear path, no visible peak, only the weight of uncertainty pressing down. The brain, faced with this obscurity, hesitates. It stalls because it cannot see where to step first. And hesitation, left unchecked, becomes paralysis. One of the most effective ways to break that paralysis is through the strategy of micro goals. Micro goals dismantle the illusion of the impossible. They take the intimidating whole and cut it into pieces so small the brain can no longer justify avoidance. Each goal is specific, measurable, and immediately actionable. This method transforms ambition from an abstract dream into concrete motion. It does not reduce ambition. It does not shrink the vision. Instead, it engineers clarity and structure so that effort becomes consistent and progress becomes inevitable. Precision is the foundation. A vague goal is fuel for procrastination. When the mind hears "finish the report," it hesitates because finish is unclear, the end point undefined, and the work feels endless. But when the command is rewritten into "write the introduction and the first 3 bullet points by 10:30, everything shifts. The step is exact. It has a start and an end. It can be measured and it can be finished. This clarity eliminates the chatter that fuels delay. The brain is not forced to argue with an abstract command. It can focus on execution. The work is no longer endless. It is a defined movement forward. Every project should begin with this act of breaking down. Writing 1 or 2 micro goals for the day creates immediate direction. Without direction, energy disperses. With direction, energy focuses. A small target becomes the rally point for attention. Time boundaries amplify this effect. The human mind responds to urgency. A goal tied to time carries weight. Do this today carries more power than do this someday. Even a 15-minute window can transform the quality of effort. The mind, constrained, channels energy more effectively. It does not wander as easily when it knows the clock is ticking. Open-ended time invites drift. Bounded time triggers focus. The difference between scattered hours and 15 sharp minutes can be dramatic. The boundary sharpens the blade. Micro goals also demand visible proof. Progress must be seen to be believed. The brain hungers for evidence that the work is real. Crossing out a completed step, checking a box in a journal, marking a board with progress. These acts are not trivial. They provide psychological reinforcement. Each completed micro goal becomes a small victory. Each victory produces dopamine, the chemical that says, "Do this again." The brain begins to crave repetition. It shifts the inner dialogue from "I cannot do this" to "I am doing this." The smallest win builds the narrative of capability. Momentum grows through sequence. Micro goals work best not as isolated fragments, but as a chain. The completion of one should naturally set the stage for the next. This sequencing builds rhythm. Gathering tools prepares the ground for creation. Outlining clears the fog before writing. Warming up primes the body for training. When arranged in sequence, small victories build confidence and make subsequent steps easier. The chain effect dismantles the sense of impossibility. But clarity is not enough unless the micro goal produces something real. Action must result in an artifact. Vague commands like "think about ideas" create the illusion of progress without evidence. Resistance thrives in vagueness. A micro goal like "write 3 possible titles in 10 minutes" produces something tangible. It leaves a trace, and that trace becomes proof. Action creates reality. Ambiguity leaves emptiness. Micro goals bridge the gap between intention and execution by producing outputs the mind can recognize. Effort without rhythm burns out. The brain is not designed for endless concentration. Sustained focus collapses without relief. Micro goals must be paired with intentional pauses. After each completion, a brief break refreshes the system. A stretch, a deep breath, a short walk. These are not luxuries. They are recovery. They prevent fatigue and preserve energy. The rhythm of work and rest creates sustainability. It allows consistency to stretch across hours, days, and weeks. Difficulty is another lever. If micro goals are too easy, they fail to stimulate growth. If they are too difficult, they trigger avoidance. The balance lies in gradual increase. Small increments accumulate into remarkable growth. Write 100 words, next time 200, then 400. Train for 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. Each increase is manageable, yet meaningful. Over time, this progression builds resilience. The brain internalizes competence. Confidence becomes natural. Growth becomes undeniable. Micro goals also protect against overwhelm. A massive project floods the mind with anxiety. It feels dangerous, uncertain, unmanageable. But when that project is broken into steps, the anxiety dissolves. Clean the house overwhelms. But clear the counter, vacuum one room, organize one drawer, these are possible. They are small enough to handle, large enough to matter. The whole may be intimidating, but the parts are approachable. Step by step, the impossible becomes manageable. Accountability strengthens micro goals further. When the step is shared with another, its weight increases. A private intention is easier to ignore. A shared commitment is harder to abandon. The brain, sensitive to social cost, moves to avoid embarrassment. Saying, "I will send you my draft by tonight," creates pressure. That pressure multiplies commitment. Micro goals plus accountability form an external wall against procrastination. Obstacles will always rise. Distractions will intrude. Plans will face friction. Micro goals become stronger when paired with anticipation. Silence the notifications before focus begins. Prepare alternate steps if one task depends on another person. Create small contingency strategies for likely disruptions. Planning in advance keeps momentum alive when obstacles appear. Resistance thrives on surprise, but loses power when the response is already prepared. Completion must be celebrated. Recognition is fuel. Each finished micro goal deserves acknowledgement. The celebration need not be grand. It may be a small gesture, a pause to reflect, a moment of gratitude, a mark in a notebook. The act of recognition reinforces the behavior. It signals to the brain, completion matters. And the brain learns to seek completion again. Reflection deepens learning. After micro goals are executed, look back briefly. Ask what worked, where resistance rose, which strategies succeeded. Reflection is not wasted time. It converts action into wisdom. It makes the next set of goals sharper. The cycle becomes self-correcting. Plan, act, reflect, adjust, repeat. Each round strengthens the next. Micro goals cultivate patience. They shift attention from dramatic transformation to steady accumulation. They teach that mastery is not achieved in sudden leaps, but in repeated steps. Each completed goal is proof of capacity. Proof builds trust. Trust builds momentum. Momentum builds identity. A person who completes micro goals daily becomes a person who finishes, who follows through, who grows. Integrated into larger objectives, micro goals transform ambition into reality. A year's vision becomes monthly goals. Monthly goals become weekly actions. Weekly actions become daily steps. The structure cascades down from the highest aim to the smallest movement. And because each step is manageable, the chain is unbroken. Small wins accumulate into large outcomes. Over months, the compound effect reshapes life. Micro goals create self-reliance. They replace dependence on motivation with the certainty of structure. They rewire the brain to approach difficulty with process instead of panic. They transform hesitation into habit. They train discipline to act regardless of mood. The practice of micro goals is not a trick of productivity. It is a framework for resilience, consistency, and mastery. Applied with discipline, the results are transformative. A week of micro goals can build confidence. A month can create new habits. A year can rebuild an entire identity. Each small victory stacks on the last. Each day of clarity becomes evidence, and evidence builds the life that once felt unreachable. When hesitation returns, and it always does, micro goals remain the answer. They are the footholds in the fog, the handholds on the climb, the structure that dismantles paralysis. They turn the impossible into the inevitable, one step at a time. You have now seen how even the largest mountain can be broken into steps small enough to climb. You have learned that resistance thrives in the fog of vagueness, but loses its grip the moment you define the next precise action. You have practiced turning hesitation into movement and movement into proof. Micro goals are not tricks. They are the foundation of consistency, the rhythm of daily progress, the small victories that rewrite the story you tell yourself about what you are capable of. But here is the truth that comes after the first taste of progress. Not every step matters equally. Some movements feel busy, but take you nowhere. Some micro goals fill the page, but fail to build momentum. And if you are not careful, you will confuse motion for growth and find yourself working without moving forward. This is the hidden danger of progress, when you forget that direction matters more than speed. The next chapter will take you further, into the strategy of sequencing, into the structure that ensures every step builds on the last. It will show you how to arrange your effort so that nothing is wasted, so that momentum does not fade but compounds, so that each micro goal is not just a small action but part of a larger chain pulling you toward transformation. Because progress without design is fragile, but progress with design becomes inevitable. And when you see how to build that chain, you will understand why the people who consistently win hard battles are not those who rush blindly, but those who construct momentum carefully, step after step, until resistance no longer has anywhere left to hide. Chapter 3. Leverage discomfort. Discomfort has been misread by most people for their entire lives. They see it as an enemy, as a signal to retreat, as the quiet whisper that says, "Not today, not now, maybe later." But discomfort is not the enemy. It is not the wall. It is the compass. It points directly toward growth. Every time unease arises, it is revealing the places where your mind and body are resisting expansion. And resistance is always the doorway to progress. Pain, struggle, tension. These are not punishments. They are the raw materials of transformation. To turn them into motivation requires a shift in perception. It requires a deliberate decision to interpret discomfort not as obstruction, but as fuel. The capacity to endure discomfort intentionally, and more than that, to use it as leverage, is what separates those who drift from those who rise, those who settle for comfort from those who achieve extraordinary outcomes. The first move is awareness. You cannot use what you refuse to see. Observe discomfort without judgment. The moment tension rises, name it. Is it physical fatigue, mental strain, emotional unease, or the sting of fear? Naming reduces power. A vague, shapeless unease controls you. But once it is identified, this is mental strain, this is fear of failure, this is fatigue, it becomes a signal with purpose. When the chest tightens, when procrastination spikes, when distraction calls, these are not verdicts on your ability. They are cues that you are at the edge of growth. Reframe discomfort as proof of value. The tasks that are easy, safe, and comfortable rarely matter. They produce little impact. But the work that tests endurance, stretches patience, and demands courage is the work that leaves a mark. When resistance flares, recognize it as evidence that you are operating outside the comfort zone. Discomfort becomes the metric of growth. Instead of avoiding it, measure it, study it, and let it guide you toward the work that matters most. The way to build strength is through controlled exposure. Begin with manageable discomfort. Wake up earlier than usual. Take a cold shower. Have the difficult conversation. Try the skill that scares you. Each small hardship trains the nervous system to tolerate more. Over time, the threshold of discomfort expands. What once felt unbearable becomes familiar terrain. The mind adapts, the body follows. Small acts of voluntary discomfort compound into resilience that reveals itself when larger challenges appear. Discomfort also carries energy. It heightens awareness, it quickens the pulse, it stirs the system into motion. Too often, people interpret this energy as threat. In truth, it is engagement. It is the body saying, "You are alive, you are active, you are present." Instead of retreating from that intensity, channel it. Direct physical tension into purposeful movement. Convert mental strain into deep concentration. Use emotional unease to make decisive choices. The very sensations you once feared can be redirected into fuel for action. The internal dialogue becomes the hinge. When fatigue rises, when discomfort sharpens, what you say to yourself determines the outcome. The weak narrative says, "I cannot continue." The strong narrative says, "This is resistance shaping me." Every repetition, every page, every step is proof that I am growing. The brain listens to meaning. Assign pain the meaning of progress, and it becomes bearable. Assign it the meaning of punishment, and it becomes unbearable. Words change physiology. They change behavior. They change the relationship to effort itself. This reframing accelerates learning. Every new skill comes wrapped in frustration, mistakes, and repeated failure. Each misstep is uncomfortable, but each one is evidence of progress. High performers embrace this cycle. They see error not as shame, but as experiment. Every error is data. Every attempt, no matter how flawed, moves mastery closer. By leaning into the sting of imperfection, you create space for growth. You accept the discomfort of not knowing as the necessary price of becoming capable. Emotional discomfort holds the same opportunity. Fear, doubt, and anxiety usually show up at the doorway of tasks that matter most. They arrive before the conversations that change relationships, before the projects that redefine careers, before the risks that shift lives. Do not retreat, dissect them. Ask, what is the worst case? What can I control? What steps reduce risk? Fear transforms from fog into guide. Each step taken while fear still lingers is a rehearsal of courage, and courage compounds. Pair discomfort with micro-action. The scale of a task magnifies resistance. But when you divide the work into small steps, discomfort loses weight. Start with one clear action, complete it, and let the completion build momentum. Discomfort signals importance. Action begins progress, progress rewrites the story. Step by step, the loop strengthens. Over time, the mind learns to respond to discomfort with movement instead of hesitation. Reflection turns temporary pain into permanent wisdom. After a difficult effort, pause. Ask, what was learned? How was endurance stretched? What strategies worked? Record it in a journal. Review it mentally. Share it with a mentor. Reflection transforms discomfort into investment. The brain begins to associate pain not with wasted effort, but with valuable lessons. Each hard moment becomes a deposit in the account of growth. Physical and mental training amplify each other. Physical effort exposes the body to strain. High-intensity work, endurance training, even simple movement, all train the nervous system to tolerate stress. Mental practice builds the same resilience. Meditation, deliberate study, deep focus. Together they form a unified system. Both body and mind learn that discomfort is not permanent. Pain is temporary. Mastery is enduring. Reward locks the lesson in place. Reinforcement does not need to be extravagant. A checkmark on the list, a quiet moment of relief, a brief acknowledgement of progress, all signal to the brain that effort is worthwhile. The nervous system begins to anticipate satisfaction at the end of effort. Discomfort becomes linked not to dread, but to reward. Future challenges become easier to embrace because the brain now expects pleasure on the other side of pain. Avoidance has triggers. Fatigue, distraction, negative self-talk, fear of judgment. These are the common ones. Treat them as puzzles. Each has a countermeasure. Timed focus blocks defeat drift. Environment design blocks distraction. Mental scripts replace doubt. Each time you neutralize a trigger, you teach the mind that avoidance is not inevitable. Resistance loses ground. Action becomes habit. Another strategy is pre-stress. Expose yourself to controlled difficulty before it matters. Rehearse the speech before the audience arrives. Solve a tough problem before the deadline looms. Train your body in smaller bursts before the marathon comes. Pre-stress reduces shock. It teaches the nervous system that difficulty is familiar. Hardship stops being a surprise and starts being expected. Discomfort can also be learned through modeling. Observe those who endure. Watch how they interpret pain, sustain effort, keep moving. Borrow their strategies. See their struggle not as failure, but as blueprint. Recognize that struggle is universal. You are not singled out. Everyone meets resistance. The difference is in how they respond. Those who treat discomfort as compass move forward. Those who treat it as stop sign stay behind. But leverage must be scaled. Reckless exposure to hardship breaks people. Gradual exposure builds them. The goal is not burnout. The goal is adaptation. Scale discomfort slowly, expand capacity carefully, and let progress accumulate without collapse. Growth is sustainable only when discomfort is managed like training. Just enough to stretch, never enough to destroy. The principle is simple. Absence of discomfort is absence of growth. A comfortable life is a stagnant life. Challenge forces change. Unease forces evolution. Each moment of discomfort is an invitation. Accept it, and you grow. Reject it, and you remain. Pain is not punishment. It is the price of becoming. Through deliberate practice, leaning into discomfort, designing small hardships, reflecting on lessons, rewarding effort, you reshape your nervous system, your mindset, your identity. What was once unbearable becomes familiar. What was once terrifying becomes motivating. Every step into discomfort becomes a declaration. Growth is the priority. When you live this way, discomfort no longer controls you. It fuels you. It points you forward. It becomes the signal that you are alive, engaged, moving toward a life worth living. Discomfort has always carried a message, but most people have misread it. They hear the quickened breath, the restless nerves, the tightening in the chest, and they think it means stop. What it really means is go. Every moment of unease is a signal that you are standing at the edge of growth, and what you choose to do in that moment decides whether you remain the same or become something greater. But the story of growth does not end with facing discomfort. Leaning into pain can spark progress, but it is ritual that turns sparks into fire. Without structure, without deliberate practices that anchor the will, the lessons of discomfort fade and resistance finds its way back in. The next chapter is about ritualizing toughness, building the kind of daily armor that makes action less of a choice and more of a rhythm, less of a struggle and more of a habit. Because once you learn to ritualize resilience, you stop waiting for strength to arrive. You carry it with you into every hard task, every difficult decision, every moment that asks who you are willing to become. Chapter 4. Ritualize toughness. Build habits that stick. What makes one person falter when resistance rises while another moves forward as if nothing stands in the way? The answer is not luck, not talent, and not a mysterious force of willpower available only to a chosen few. The answer is ritual. Not ritual as decoration or ceremony, but ritual as the steady rhythm of repeated action, performed so consistently that it ceases to be a choice and becomes a fact of identity. Toughness does not arrive suddenly in a single moment of need. It is built silently, invisibly, in the patterns you repeat when no one is watching. People often imagine toughness as something dramatic. They picture soldiers enduring hardship, athletes pushing through exhaustion, leaders carrying entire organizations on their shoulders. These are the images of toughness revealed, not toughness created. The creation happens much earlier, in the hours when no spotlight shines, in the moments when the only audience is your own reflection. It is in those ordinary minutes that resilience is born, and it is ritual that gives it life. Ritual is the framework that removes negotiation. Without it, every day becomes an argument with yourself. Do I feel like working out? Should I start writing now or later? Do I really need to reflect tonight? Each question is an invitation for resistance to whisper, delay, or distract. And resistance is clever. It knows how to sound reasonable, how to disguise avoidance as practicality. But ritual silences the debate. It gives no room for hesitation. The act is already decided. You do it not because you feel like it, but because it is what you do. That is the essence of ritualized toughness, training the body and mind to step into action without waiting for permission from mood. Feelings fluctuate, circumstances shift, energy rises and falls, but ritual holds steady like the pulse of a drumbeat that never misses. And when you align yourself to that rhythm, action becomes inevitable. At its core, ritual is simple. It is not meant to be complicated or grand. A ritual is not a spectacle to impress others. It is a set of deliberate behaviors repeated until they are woven into the nervous system. Done once, they are practice. Done daily, they are transformation. The simplicity deceives many people because they expect toughness to be forged in extraordinary events. But true toughness is built in the ordinary, in the act of honoring small, consistent behaviors even when no one sees. Think of how effortlessly you tie your shoes, how naturally you lock the door when you leave the house, how unconsciously you brush your teeth at night. None of these require thought or debate. They are automatic because repetition has burned them into identity. Ritualized toughness applies this same principle to the habits that shape growth. You no longer need to ask if you should act, you simply do. But ritual does not emerge from vague aspirations. You cannot ritualize be more productive or get healthier. Those are wishes, not behaviors. Ritual requires precision. It demands clarity sharp enough to cut through resistance. 10 minutes of focused writing after coffee, a short reflection before bed, a series of push-ups before the morning shower. These are actions that can be repeated, measured, and proven. Without clarity, ritual dissolves into nothing. With clarity, it engraves itself into your life. Repetition is the sculptor of identity. The first attempts at a ritual often feel awkward, forced, even unnatural. Resistance pushes back, whispering that you can wait until tomorrow, that missing once won't matter, that you will start when you feel more ready. But repetition chips away at those whispers. Each time you complete the ritual, the groove deepens. The action becomes smoother, easier, less negotiable. Eventually, you do not think of it as effort. You think of it as who you are. The shift from "I must make myself do this" to "this is what I do" to "this is who I am" is the quiet transformation ritual creates. Simplicity is what allows the repetition to survive. Elaborate routines collapse under fatigue. A ritual that requires an hour and 10 steps might look impressive for a week, but will not endure for a lifetime. A ritual that requires 10 minutes, repeated without fail, will last. The strongest rituals are small enough to be unbreakable and consistent enough to be transformative. It is not the size of the ritual that matters, but the fact that it survives. And rituals survive best when they are anchored. The brain thrives on association. Attach a new ritual to an old habit and the chain strengthens. Journal after coffee. Stretch after brushing your teeth. Reflect after closing the laptop at night. When one action triggers the next, resistance has no opening. The sequence pulls you forward, and soon the ritual feels inevitable. Environment also reinforces ritual. Behavior is never separate from context. A cluttered desk invites distraction. A noisy room fractures focus. A carefully designed environment whispers readiness. Over time, the space itself becomes part of the ritual. You sit at the desk and your mind sharpens. You step onto the mat and your body prepares to move. The ritual fuses with the place, and the place reminds you who you are. But rituals risk becoming hollow if they lack reflection. Repetition without meaning is fragile. Motion alone does not transform you. Meaning does. Reflection is the seal. A moment to pause, to acknowledge, to record. A sentence written in a journal. A breath of recognition. Reflection ensures that the ritual is not just a movement of the body, but a shaping of the self. And over time, rituals accumulate into identity. Each repetition is a vote. Each vote says something about who you are. One ritual is a single vote for discipline. 100 are a declaration. 1,000 are a constitution written into the nervous system. Identity is built not in a single choice, but in repeated votes. And when enough votes are cast, the identity becomes undeniable. You no longer rely on fragile willpower. You act because this is who you have become. This is the quiet power of ritualized toughness. It does not ask whether you feel ready. It does not beg inspiration to arrive. It builds strength through repetition until hesitation has nowhere left to stand. It creates a self that acts regardless of mood, regardless of fatigue, regardless of circumstance. Toughness is not a gift. It is not reserved for the chosen. It is a structure available to anyone willing to honor the repetition, the clarity, the simplicity, and the reflection that rituals demand. And once you build it, you no longer have to wonder whether you will act when resistance rises. The answer has already been decided. The ritual has already spoken. And that is why, when the storm comes, when pressure mounts, when resistance is at its loudest, the strongest people do not hesitate. They have already built the habit of moving forward. They have already rehearsed the act of resilience. They have already ritualized toughness. Ritual is no longer a set of repeated movements. It has become your foundation. Each small action you have chosen, each simple behavior you have performed with intention, has carved a groove into your identity. You began with effort, then with practice, and now with inevitability. The rituals you honor each day are no longer things you merely do. They are evidence of who you are becoming. And in this shift, toughness ceases to be something you reach for in moments of need. It becomes the atmosphere you live in. Yet there is still a deeper layer. Ritual is the structure, but what fills that structure is discomfort. Every repetition, every deliberate act carries a shadow of unease. Sometimes it is the fatigue of waking earlier than you want. Sometimes it is the sting of pushing your body past what it prefers. Sometimes it is the silence of sitting with your thoughts when the easier choice would be distraction. That discomfort is not a mistake. It is the signal that you are stretching beyond the edges of comfort. and it is in those stretches that growth begins. The truth is, ritual and discomfort are inseparable. One gives you the framework, the other gives you the fuel. You cannot build toughness without both. Ritual keeps you consistent when feelings fade, and discomfort teaches you that feelings are not the ruler of your life. Together, they form the cycle by which resilience becomes permanent. So the path now shifts. You have learned to ritualize toughness, to strip choice away from resistance, to engrave discipline into your daily rhythm. But the next frontier is not about automaticity. It is about embracing what most people avoid. The next chapter asks whether you can step into discomfort not reluctantly, but deliberately. Whether you can meet pain, tension, and unease not as enemies, but as teachers. Whether you can learn to transform what once stopped you into the very thing that drives you. Because toughness is not only about repeating habits until they stick, it is about choosing again and again to walk into the fire of discomfort and to discover that each time you do, the flames forge you into something stronger. Chapter 5 is where you will learn to leverage that fire, not merely to withstand it, but to make it the engine of your growth. Chapter 5, Accountability Systems, Outsmart Procrastination with Pressure. Procrastination is a patient predator. It does not strike with teeth bared or claws exposed. It drifts quietly, lurking at the edge of every intention, waiting for hesitation to give it space. And when it feeds, it does not devour in great dramatic bites, but in small, nearly invisible nibbles. 10 minutes scrolling, 15 minutes rearranging your desk, a whole afternoon lost to minor distractions disguised as productivity. By the time you notice, the day is gone, and with it, the promise of progress. This is the nature of procrastination, not loud destruction, but slow erosion. And if you let it, it will carve away at your goals until even your confidence in achieving them wears thin. Left unchecked, the mind will drift toward comfort, toward the path of least resistance. It is not moral weakness. It is human wiring. The brain evolved to conserve energy, to choose safety, to avoid unnecessary risk. That wiring once kept us alive in dangerous environments. But in the modern world, where danger is rare and distraction is abundant, the same instinct sabotages growth. You cannot fight procrastination with raw willpower alone. Willpower is fragile. It flickers, it fades, it tires quickly. A system must replace it, something sturdier, something external, something that applies pressure when motivation falters. That system is accountability. Accountability systems are scaffolding. They brace you against collapse. They convert promises into proof, goals into commitments, intentions into actions. Where procrastination thrives in secrecy, accountability thrives in exposure. When you declare your goal out loud, when you set a deadline others can see, when you agree to deliver results that someone else will measure, procrastination loses its quiet hiding place. Visibility is the first strike against delay. What remains unseen is easy to forget, easy to excuse, easy to bury beneath the comfort of distraction. But what is made visible cannot be ignored. Write your goal on a wall. Place it in a calendar others share. Send a message to a partner declaring what you will complete. The very act of making intention visible creates a tension inside the mind. That tension does not vanish until the goal is either abandoned or achieved. And abandoning what is visible to others is far more difficult than abandoning what lives only in your head. But visibility alone is not enough. Rhythm strengthens accountability. A single declaration can inspire a burst of action, but bursts fade. What you need is a steady beat, a regular interval at which progress must be shown. This is the power of reporting. When you know you must present results, daily, weekly, or even in the form of a simple nightly journal, you strip procrastination of its most powerful weapon: delay. Because delay is only painless when no one notices. Regular reporting ensures someone always notices, even if that someone is you. Deadlines are the next weapon. Open-ended tasks are an open invitation for procrastination. Without boundaries, the mind tells itself that tomorrow will be better, that next week will be easier, that later is safer. But later is the lie. Procrastination repeats until opportunity is gone. A deadline sharpens the choice. It forces the brain to shift from vague intention to urgent execution. The most powerful deadlines are tight enough to inspire, but not so rigid that they crush. They balance urgency with possibility, challenge with achievability. Social pressure sharpens the edge further. Human beings are wired to care about reputation, to care about promises kept, to care about standing in the eyes of others. Accountability systems tap this instinct. When you announce your goal to a friend, when you report to a group, when you allow your effort to be measured against your word, procrastination is no longer a private matter. Failure now carries social weight, and the mind, reluctant to bear that weight, chooses action. Consequences complete the system. Pressure without stakes is a bluff, and procrastination knows how to call it. A missed deadline that carries no cost will be ignored. But when consequences are clear, predetermined, and unavoidable, procrastination hesitates. The consequence need not be severe. It only needs to be real. A forfeited reward, an extra task, a sacrifice you feel. When avoidance becomes more painful than action, action wins. And yet accountability is not only about pressure, it is also about precision. Big tasks, undefined and vague, are heavy to lift. They weigh down the mind until starting feels impossible. Accountability works best when paired with micro goals, each one small, clear, and trackable. Each micro goal completed is proof, each proof a step forward, each step forward a crack in procrastination's armor. Over time, the chain of small completions builds momentum too powerful to ignore. Systems must evolve. Accountability is not fixed, it is alive. What worked once may lose strength. Deadlines that once inspired may grow too soft. Consequences may grow too light. This is why reflection matters. Ask, is the system still pushing me? Is it still tight enough to make procrastination costly? Refinement keeps the system sharp. Without it, accountability dulls and procrastination creeps back in. Technology helps amplify the system. Reminders, trackers, automated alerts. These tools extend your awareness, delivering pressure exactly when you need it. A calendar ping before a meeting. A progress chart that shows red when you fall behind. A message sent automatically when you miss a check-in. These are small nudges, but combined with visibility and consequence, they tighten the net until procrastination has nowhere left to hide. But accountability must not become punishment. Too much rigidity, too much pressure, and the system breaks you instead of building you. True accountability balances firmness with compassion. A missed deadline is not a verdict, it is data. Data to adjust, refine, and strengthen. The goal is not to shame yourself, but to design a structure that keeps you moving, even imperfectly, toward the life you want. In the end, accountability systems are leverage. They take the fragile energy of willpower and multiply it. They ensure that resistance meets friction at every turn. They make procrastination not just uncomfortable, but costly, and action not just possible, but inevitable. And each time you honor the system, you carve a deeper groove of reliability into your identity. Procrastination thrives in silence. Accountability breaks the silence with exposure, with consequence, with steady rhythm. And when you build these systems with care, procrastination may whisper, but it will no longer control you, because pressure has become your ally and action has become your habit. Accountability has shown you how pressure can be harnessed as a weapon, how visibility, consequence, and rhythm combine to strip procrastination of its power. But accountability, no matter how strong, is still a structure that leans on others, on systems, on external scaffolding. The next step is to ask a harder question. What happens when there is no one watching, no one waiting for your report, no system nudging you forward? Can you still move? That is where the deeper challenge begins. Because discipline is not complete until it shifts from being borrowed to being owned. You have learned how to use accountability to force progress. Now you must learn how to internalize that same pressure, to transform the watchful eyes of others into the watchful eye of yourself, to build a form of self-respect so sharp that breaking your word to yourself feels impossible. And that is where we go next, into the territory where systems fade and character is revealed, where you are no longer carried by scaffolding, but held upright by the spine of your own integrity. Chapter 6 is where you discover what happens when the external pressure falls silent, and the only question left is whether you can hold yourself accountable in the private quiet of your own life. Chapter 6. Visualization Power. Visualization is not fantasy. It is not wishful thinking or idle daydreaming. It is rehearsal, precise and deliberate, a mental discipline that primes the body and mind for action before the first move is ever made. To understand its true power is to recognize that every achievement begins twice, once in the imagination and once in the execution. And those who learn to harness the first stage bend reality to meet their preparation. The human brain is a simulation engine. Long before you lift a weight, speak a word, write a sentence, or step onto a stage, your mind runs scenarios, anticipating outcomes, sketching possible futures. This is not a flaw. It is survival. For millennia, the ability to anticipate what the hunt would require, what the storm would demand, what the rival might attempt, was the difference between life and death. Today, that same anticipatory mechanism remains, but instead of survival in the wilderness, it governs survival in the wilderness of modern ambition. Those who drift allow their minds to simulate fear, failure, embarrassment. Those who discipline themselves use the same mechanism to simulate mastery, calm, precision, and success. This is the heart of visualization, directing the mind's natural rehearsal engine toward outcomes that serve you rather than against you. The mistake most people make is thinking visualization is indulgence. They sit back, close their eyes, and imagine applause, trophies, wealth, or recognition, as if picturing the end result will carry them to it. That kind of daydreaming has little power because it lacks structure, lacks weight, lacks friction. True visualization is built on detail. It is grounded in the senses, layered with emotion, timed with precision, and repeated until the brain can no longer tell the difference between rehearsal and reality. When you stand in front of the hard task you once feared, the nervous system whispers, "I have been here before." That familiarity erases hesitation, reduces anxiety, and replaces it with a strange, powerful calm. To visualize well, you must begin with clarity. The mind does not respond to vague pictures. It responds to specific, vivid, sensory-rich experience. Imagine a writer sitting at a desk, not simply with the abstract idea of finishing a book, but with the sound of fingers striking keys, the smell of coffee cooling beside the screen, the glow of the cursor waiting on the blank page, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a word count tick upward. That is not fantasy. That is rehearsal. Or imagine an athlete preparing for a race. It is not enough to see themselves at the finish line, arms raised in victory. They must feel the texture of the track beneath their shoes, hear the staggered breaths of competitors, sense the pounding rhythm of their own heart, and push through the sting of fatigue as if it were real. The brain lights up in those moments as if the body were already in motion, laying down neural pathways that make execution smoother, faster, more automatic. Science confirms what experience has long suggested. Neuroscientists have shown that imagining an action activates many of the same neural circuits as performing it. The motor cortex does not distinguish sharply between mental rehearsal and physical practice. When pianists imagine themselves playing scales, their brains fire in patterns nearly identical to actual performance. When basketball players picture free throws in meticulous detail, their accuracy improves measurably, even without touching the ball. The brain does not wait for reality to validate its practice. It builds networks in anticipation, ready to be called upon when the moment comes. This is the leverage of visualization. You can multiply the hours of practice without multiplying fatigue. But visualization is not only about the outcome. Focusing solely on the end result can actually weaken resilience because reality rarely unfolds as smoothly as the mind's highlight reel. To be effective, visualization must encompass the process, the obstacles, the setbacks, and the responses. Imagine the student preparing for an exam. If they only picture the satisfaction of receiving a high grade, they may be discouraged the moment confusion arises in study. But if they visualize sitting with the book, wrestling with a difficult concept, feeling frustration rise, and then calmly breathing, rereading, breaking the material into smaller parts, and slowly understanding, that visualization trains them not only for success, but for endurance. It prepares them for the storm as well as the sun. The same is true for every pursuit. Success is not a straight line. Visualization, when done well, rehearses the curves, the dips, the detours, so that when they arrive in reality, they feel familiar, not fatal. Another dimension of visualization is emotion. The nervous system is not moved by images alone. It is moved by meaning. To visualize effectively, you must feel. You must summon the surge of confidence, the relief of breakthrough, the pride of completion, the strength of perseverance. These emotions wire the rehearsal more deeply into the brain. They are chemical signatures that reinforce memory and motivation. When you imagine finishing the run, delivering the speech, closing the deal, do not picture it coldly. Feel the heartbeat steadying, the voice growing firm, the handshake sealing commitment. Emotions make the rehearsal unforgettable. And when the day arrives, your body remembers not only the action but the feeling, carrying you toward it with an almost magnetic pull. Timing matters. Visualization is most potent when it immediately precedes action. To rehearse a presentation the night before is useful, but to rehearse it in the minutes before stepping onto the stage transforms anxiety into energy. The nervous system primes itself, the heart rate steadies, the focus sharpens. Similarly, visualizing the first steps of a workout before beginning increases adherence and reduces drop-off. The brain craves continuity between rehearsal and execution. When the gap is short, performance rises. Process visualization is equally vital. Imagine the sequence of micro-actions: opening the laptop, drafting the first line, refining the structure, saving the document. Each step rehearsed in order makes the chain easier to follow under real pressure. This reduces decision fatigue, the silent killer of momentum. When the brain has already walked the path, it does not stall at each junction, wondering what comes next. It flows. To deepen this practice, narrative structure can be used. Tell yourself a story, not only of success, but of the path to it. Narratives engage more of the brain than isolated images because humans are wired for story. The beginning is preparation, the middle is struggle, the climax is breakthrough, and the resolution is completion. By casting yourself as the protagonist in a coherent story, you transform tasks into chapters of a larger arc, obstacles into plot twists, victories into climaxes. This narrative engagement sustains focus and resilience because the mind now sees each step not as random drudgery, but as part of a meaningful whole. And yet, the most overlooked aspect of visualization is adversity. Most people avoid it. They want to imagine only triumph, only smooth performance, only praise. But mastery comes from rehearsing difficulty. Visualize the moments when your legs ache, when the code won't run, when the conversation turns tense, when fatigue screams for surrender. See it, feel it, and then rehearse your response. Calm breath, adjusted strategy, a small push forward. This trains the nervous system to remain composed under pressure. When real adversity strikes, the brain recognizes it. I have seen this before. I know what to do. Fear loses its fangs when it has been rehearsed. Pair visualization with micro goals. Do not only picture the mountain summit, picture reaching the next ridge, then the next, then the next. Each micro success rehearsed in detail creates a map of accomplishment that reduces the intimidation of the whole. The brain learns to celebrate progression, not just completion, and this sustains motivation through long journeys. Environmental cues amplify visualization. To rehearse in the same physical space where the action will occur strengthens transfer. The body recalls the lighting, the sounds, the textures, and feels at home when the moment arrives. Musicians practice on the stage before performance. Athletes walk the field before competition. Writers sit at the desk where the words will be born. The mind anchors imagery to the environment, creating familiarity that steadies nerves. For maximum effect, contrast must be used. Do not only visualize success, visualize the consequence of failure. Feel the sting of regret, the weight of wasted time, the dull ache of disappointment. Then return to the vision of triumph. The contrast sharpens motivation. The brain recoils from the pain of loss and leans harder toward the joy of victory. This dual visualization creates both pull and push, a complete motivational circuit. Visualization is strengthened by accountability. Share your rehearsal. Speak it aloud to a trusted partner. Describe what you will do, how you will feel, how you will overcome setbacks. By articulating it, you bind yourself not only mentally, but socially. The mind resists breaking commitments spoken aloud. Visualization then becomes not only private rehearsal, but public declaration, doubling its power. Journaling enhances retention. Write your visualization after practicing it. Sketch the scenes, describe the emotions, outline the process. This transforms fleeting images into lasting records. The act of writing forces clarity. Reviewing the notes reminds the brain of its prior rehearsal, reinforcing confidence. Over time, the journal becomes a library of rehearsed victories, a private archive of preparation that strengthens identity. I am someone who sees success before it comes. Even pressure can be simulated. Visualize under time constraints. Imagine the clock ticking, the deadline approaching, the urgency rising. Rehearse calm, decisive action within that pressure. This inoculates the mind against stress. When real deadlines loom, you are not surprised, you are ready. Above all, visualization must become ritual. Occasional practice has fleeting benefit. Daily practice rewires the brain. Begin each day with a brief rehearsal of the key tasks. See them, feel them, walk through them in detail. The nervous system primes itself. Resistance weakens. Action follows naturally. With time, the boundary between imagined success and lived success blurs. The mind no longer treats ambition as distant. It treats it as inevitable. Visualization is not optional for those who seek mastery. It is the blueprint of achievement, the mental architecture that reality follows. When you imagine with clarity, with emotion, with process, with adversity, you are not playing pretend. You are laying down tracks in the nervous system, carving grooves that the body will follow when the moment demands. Those who neglect this tool leave their success to chance. Those who embrace it step into every challenge already rehearsed, already ready, already familiar. And here lies the deeper truth. Visualization is not about seeing what you want. It is about becoming what you see. The mind you cultivate in rehearsal is the mind that acts in reality. Each image etched into memory is a vote for the self you are becoming. Each rehearsal is a rehearsal of identity. When you see yourself showing up with calm, with strength, with resilience, the day arrives when you do not need to imagine it anymore. You live it. Visualization has now given you the ability to step into your future before you arrive there, to practice the hardest moments of your life without consequence, to carve neural pathways that make success feel inevitable. But rehearsal, no matter how vivid, is only preparation. What matters is how you meet the moment when it is no longer imagined but real, when the body aches, when the comfort zone calls, when avoidance tempts you back into safety. The next challenge is no longer about seeing yourself succeed. It is about stepping into the weight of discomfort and refusing to shrink. Because success is not only envisioned, it is forged in the heat of pressure, in the sharp edge of unease, in the territory where your mind whispers retreat and your will answers forward. Chapter 7 is where that edge becomes your proving ground. It is where you learn not to fear discomfort, but to wield it, not to wait for the storm to pass, but to use the storm as the very wind that pushes you further. Chapter 7, Energy Management. Maximize willpower without burning out. Willpower is not infinite. It is not a bottomless well you can draw from without consequence. It is a fragile, exhaustible resource, and those who pretend otherwise end up collapsing in frustration, mistaking depletion for weakness and burnout for failure. The truth is simple. The mind, like the body, consumes energy every time it resists temptation, every time it chooses focus over distraction, every time it pushes against resistance. To believe you can simply will yourself through life without structure is to walk blind into exhaustion. The real art lies not in squeezing willpower harder, but in managing energy with strategy, precision, and care. Discipline without energy management is a fire that burns bright and dies quickly. Discipline with energy management is a slow, steady flame capable of lighting the path for years. The difference is not effort alone, it is awareness, recovery, and alignment. Those who achieve consistently do not simply work harder. They work in rhythm with their energy, conserving strength where it would be wasted and unleashing it where it matters most. The first principle of energy management is recognition. Energy is not static. It rises and falls with the body's natural rhythms, with sleep, nutrition, stress, and environment. Some hours of the day are sharp, others sluggish. Some environments give strength, others quietly drain it. To ignore these patterns is to squander half your capacity before the task even begins. The person who pushes a major project at their lowest ebb is like a runner sprinting uphill with weights on their ankles, possible but costly. The person who aligns important work with natural peaks is like a runner catching a tailwind. Progress feels almost inevitable. Tracking your energy across days and weeks reveals a map, a personal landscape of peaks and valleys. Perhaps morning holds your focus, or perhaps late evening carries your creativity. Perhaps certain foods sharpen you, others dull you. Perhaps your will collapses when you scroll too long or strengthens when you walk outside. These patterns are not random. They are the architecture of your discipline. Ignoring them is negligence. Observing them is mastery. And observation is not enough. Management demands deliberate recovery. Rest is not laziness. It is a tool. The strongest performers do not treat recovery as indulgence, but as fuel. Sleep, hydration, small breaks, intentional pauses, these are not distractions from work, but reinforcements for it. A marathoner does not refuse water, claiming toughness. They drink because they know hydration sustains endurance. The same is true for the mind. Without pause, without sleep, without renewal, effort decays into frustration, and resistance grows louder until even the smallest task feels impossible. This is why short breaks matter. Not endless escape into distraction, but deliberate, mindful pauses. A stretch, a breath, a sip of water, a brief step outside to feel the air. Minutes of recovery restore hours of capacity. The brain cannot sprint forever, but it can run, pause, recover, and run again with remarkable consistency. Energy is also a matter of fuel. The body is not a machine that runs equally on anything. Stable blood sugar, hydration, nutrients, these are the foundation of focus. Skipped meals, reliance on stimulants, or careless fueling create spikes and crashes that amplify procrastination and make discipline feel impossible. Hunger and fatigue masquerade as laziness. They are not. They are depletion. A steady system of nourishment sustains clarity. Food is not just comfort, it is strategy. Then there is the matter of attention. Every act of divided focus burns energy. Multitasking is not efficiency, it is leakage. Each switch of attention drains reserves, leaving less for the work that matters. Energy management demands concentration. A block of uninterrupted time produces tenfold what scattered minutes produce. Protecting attention is protecting energy. To guard your focus is to guard your strength. The environment plays its role too. Willpower is consumed by unnecessary decisions, by clutter, by constant temptation. Every notification, every distraction, every unmade choice taxes the mind. By designing your surroundings with intention, removing friction from desired actions, increasing friction for distractions, you preserve energy. Shoes by the door make exercise easier. A clear desk makes work immediate. A silenced phone makes focus possible. Every ounce of reduced friction is an ounce of willpower saved. Priorities sharpen the edge. Energy poured into trivialities is energy stolen from what matters. Without clarity, the mind wastes itself on minor battles, exhausted before it reaches the war. Choose one or two essential tasks each day. Give them your peak. Let the rest arrange themselves in the margins. The scattered accomplish fragments. The focused accomplish monuments. Habits transform energy economics entirely. Every time you automate a behavior through repetition, you free the mind from debate. Habits do not demand negotiation. They simply unfold. The person who turns practice, exercise, journaling, or focus into habit does not ask daily whether they will do it. They simply do. This is energy management at its highest form, converting costly decisions into effortless rhythms, reserving strength for challenges that cannot be automated. And energy must follow cycles. Push and release, strain and rest. To grind endlessly is not toughness but ignorance. Muscles tear without recovery. Minds fracture without pause. Energy management accepts this law and builds around it. Work is followed by deliberate disengagement, rest by renewed effort. Rituals that signal transition, a walk at sunset, deep breaths at a threshold, the shutting of a laptop, teach the mind to recover and return. Without rhythm, energy leaks. With rhythm, it compounds. But nothing drains energy faster than uncontrolled emotion. Stress, frustration, rumination, they consume mental fuel as surely as work itself. Anger burns glucose. Anxiety drains focus. Fear paralyzes choice. To conserve energy, emotions must be regulated, not suppressed but reframed. Breathing steadies the nervous system. Reframing difficulty as challenge steadies the will. Seeing setbacks as lessons steadies momentum. Emotional control is energy control. A storming mind cannot focus. A steady one can. Momentum itself becomes a source of energy. Completing small tasks generates progress. Progress generates confidence, and confidence feeds capacity. Every micro win is a spark, and sparks create flame. Momentum is the multiplier of energy. It keeps the engine turning when willpower alone would have stopped. The body must also move. Physical activity increases clarity, mood, and stamina. Even brief movement flushes fatigue and restores focus. A body left idle decays, and with it the mind. but a body engaged supports a mind that endures. The connection is inseparable. Energy is holistic. To master energy, you must also respect rhythm. Energy rises, falls, surges, and crashes. Fighting those waves is wasteful. Aligning with them is genius. Do hard things when strength is high. Handle small things when it dips. Never confuse fatigue with weakness. It is simply a signal. Listen and act accordingly. Tools exist: caffeine, music, light, to sharpen focus in the moment. Used wisely, they amplify energy. Used recklessly, they mask depletion until collapse. Strategy, not habit, makes them useful. A cup of coffee before a sprint of work can sharpen the blade. A playlist can push through a wall. Sunlight can wake the mind. But these are accents, not foundations. Rely on them alone, and the structure crumbles. Track your energy as deliberately as you track your goals. Observe patterns. Notice which tasks drain disproportionately, which activities restore, which environments fuel or sap. Awareness is architecture. Without it, energy leaks unnoticed. With it, adjustments become natural. Ultimately, energy management is not about doing less. It is about doing wisely. It is about treating willpower as a renewable resource, one that requires stewardship. Those who ignore this truth burn hot and vanish. Those who live by it burn steady and reach farther than others ever thought possible. The discipline you admire in others is rarely raw toughness alone. It is energy managed with intelligence, recovery built into the rhythm, focus protected like treasure, and habits structured like scaffolding. This is how people sustain hard work across months, years, lifetimes. This is how extraordinary results are achieved without collapse. Willpower is not a hammer to swing endlessly. It is a blade to be sharpened, used precisely, and preserved. When you learn this, procrastination loses its grip, burnout loses its inevitability, and discipline becomes not a sprint toward exhaustion, but a way of life that sustains itself. Energy management is the architecture of endurance. It is the reason some fade and some persist. To master it is to unlock a form of toughness that is sustainable, adaptable, and lasting. The kind of toughness that builds empires, completes missions, and transforms lives. Energy is the currency of discipline, and now you know how to spend it with precision, how to recover it with intention, and how to stretch it farther than you once believed possible. But energy, even perfectly managed, still needs a direction. Power without aim is wasted. Strength without focus drifts. The next challenge is to decide not only how much energy you can sustain, but where you will drive it, so it produces results that matter. Because success is not just the preservation of willpower, it is the translation of that willpower into action, into moments where clarity decides momentum, where choice decides outcome. Energy management keeps you standing. Focus turns that stance into forward motion. Chapter 8 is where you learn to aim with precision, to remove fog from the mind, and to carve through hesitation with clarity so sharp that every ounce of energy you've preserved becomes a blade that cuts clean through resistance. Chapter 8. Reward yourself strategically. Reinforce hard work wins. Effort alone is not enough. You already know that pushing endlessly without reinforcement eventually wears you down, and fatigue disguised as discipline is a silent saboteur. The human brain is not a machine of endless willpower. It is a learning system, wired to repeat behaviors that lead to something valuable and to abandon those that feel meaningless. That means if hard work is never rewarded, if the connection between effort and satisfaction is never cemented, consistency collapses. Reward is not indulgence. Reward is reinforcement. It is the bridge between effort and repetition, the invisible mechanism that convinces your nervous system that the strain, the sweat, the long hours are worth it. When the brain experiences tangible benefit after difficulty, it does not forget. Dopamine is released, confidence is reinforced, and motivation sharpens. The mind learns, do this again. It matters. It pays off. Without that loop, effort feels like a desert. With it, effort becomes a cycle that sustains itself. The power of strategic reward lies in its intentionality. This is not about random treats or shallow pleasures. It is about linking the act of discipline to the experience of benefit so tightly that one naturally follows the other. Imagine finishing a chapter of writing and deliberately allowing yourself the quiet satisfaction of stepping outside to breathe deeply, acknowledging not only the progress but the strength it took to persist. Imagine completing a grueling workout and savoring the warmth of recovery, not numbing it with distraction, but feeling the earned reward in the body itself. These moments are not trivial. They are messages to the brain. Effort leads to satisfaction. Persistence leads to payoff. Timing is crucial. A reward delayed until it loses its connection to the work is almost worthless. The mind needs immediacy. Complete a task, reinforce it at once. The clarity of cause and effect matters more than the size of the prize. Even a small acknowledgement, if timely, engraves the link between behavior and benefit into neural pathways more deeply than a grand reward that arrives too late. Rewards are also layered, internal and external. Intrinsic rewards are woven into the experience itself, the clarity you feel after solving a problem, the relief of completion, the pride and resilience, the quiet dignity of mastery. Extrinsic rewards are tangible and visible. A treat, a walk, a celebration, the recognition of peers. Both are essential. Internal reward builds the bedrock of resilience, teaching you to love the process for its own sake. External reward provides sparks of motivation, jolts of energy that remind the mind that its effort is seen, felt, valued. Together, they create a rhythm that sustains action over the long road. But not all rewards are equal. A shallow indulgence that undercuts long-term goals sabotages the loop. If you finish disciplined work by diving headlong into distraction, you erode the very focus you tried to build. Effective reinforcement must amplify effort, not weaken it. A reward should restore, sharpen, or elevate, not undo the progress. Reading a page of a book that inspires you, enjoying a meal that replenishes strength, taking a walk that clears the mind, these enhance the cycle. Scrolling mindlessly until midnight, numbing fatigue with empty stimulation, these fracture it. Reward is a tool. Treat it carelessly, and it becomes poison. Proportionality matters. Not every action deserves the same celebration. Minor wins should be met with small acknowledgments, steady but modest. Major milestones deserve greater recognition. This differentiation teaches the brain to distinguish between routine effort and extraordinary performance. If everything is rewarded equally, effort flattens. If nothing is acknowledged, effort starves. But when recognition matches the scale of the challenge, the system becomes sharp, precise, powerful. Consistency amplifies the effect. Reward must not be an afterthought. It must be integrated into the rhythm of daily life. Small checkpoints of recognition keep momentum alive. They remind the mind, yes, you did something hard, and yes, it mattered. Over weeks, this consistency creates anticipation. The nervous system begins to expect the loop: action, effort, payoff. Resistance weakens because the body knows what is coming. Work is no longer only burden, it is the gateway to satisfaction. This is the psychology of momentum. The anticipation of reward fuels the start. The reward itself seals the finish, and together they create a cycle that repeats. Suddenly, hard work is no longer something to dread. It is something to lean into, because on the other side lies reinforcement. The strongest reinforcement comes from reflection. It is not enough to feel satisfaction briefly. You must notice it, name it, internalize it. After each challenge, pause. Ask yourself, what was gained here? What skill was sharpened? What strength was proven? What evidence was created? This reflection turns reward into identity. It transforms the loop from "I did this task" into "I am the kind of person who does hard things and reaps the benefit." That shift in identity is the deepest reinforcement of all. Rewards can also be social. When effort is acknowledged by others, peers, mentors, a community, the brain responds with amplified motivation. Humans are wired to care about reputation and belonging. Sharing progress, receiving recognition, even in small doses, magnifies commitment. Suddenly, effort is not only private, it is witnessed, validated, multiplied. The discipline of one becomes the momentum of many. Variation keeps the loop alive. Predictable rewards lose impact over time as the brain habituates. Strategic novelty, an unexpected acknowledgement, a surprise moment of recognition, a different form of rest, reawakens attention and makes reinforcement fresh again. But novelty must not replace consistency. It must complement it. The foundation is steady, predictable recognition. The spark is occasional surprise. Together they sustain engagement without dullness. Above all, strategic reward must align with long-term vision. A reward that contradicts the larger goal is not reinforcement, it is sabotage. Every acknowledgement, every indulgence, every pause must be chosen with foresight. Does this strengthen the path or weaken it? When the answer is yes, reward accelerates growth. When the answer is no, reward undermines it. This is why scaling matters. As challenges grow, rewards must adapt. Small tokens keep daily engagement alive. Larger milestones deserve proportionate recognition. A marathon runner does not celebrate every mile equally, but neither do they wait until the finish line to acknowledge progress. Micro rewards sustain the journey. Macro rewards honor the destination. Together, they create a sustainable system that grows with ambition. And there is one final truth. Reward is not dependency. If effort only continues because of the prize, resilience collapses when the prize is absent. The balance must be precise. Reward strengthens effort, but effort must also strengthen itself. The greatest reinforcement is not the gift you give yourself, but the proof you carry that you are capable, resilient, disciplined. Rewards amplify. Identity sustains. When this system is designed with care, clear, timely, proportional, reflective, discipline stops being a brittle struggle. It becomes a self-sustaining cycle. Work generates reward. Reward generates motivation. Motivation generates more work. Each turn of the cycle compounds strength, builds resilience, and deepens identity. This is how persistence is forged. This is how hard work becomes not just something you endure, but something you pursue, because the very act of effort has become tied to satisfaction and progress. Reward is not dessert after the meal. It is the seasoning that makes the meal satisfying enough to repeat. Reward is not weakness. It is leverage. Use it with precision, and it transforms struggle into triumph, persistence into habit, and effort into a rhythm you can sustain for a lifetime. Strategic reward has now given you the power to reinforce your effort, to make persistence feel worthwhile, and to transform discipline from a fight into a cycle that feeds itself. But reinforcement alone is not enough. A reward strengthens what you choose to repeat, which means the real question becomes, what exactly are you repeating? If the actions are scattered, if the goals are vague, then even the most carefully designed rewards only cement confusion. The next step is to ensure that every ounce of energy, every loop of reinforcement, every cycle of persistence is directed toward a path with clarity, structure, and measurable progress. Because reward without direction is just pleasure, but reward with precision becomes power. And that is where we go next. Chapter 9, where you will learn to strip away the fog, sharpen focus to a point, and transform every disciplined action into momentum that cannot be ignored. Chapter 9, Fear-Setting Technique. Face challenges without paralysis. Fear is not proof that you are weak, and it is not a verdict that you will fail. Fear is a signal, an alarm that goes off in the nervous system the moment the mind imagines danger, loss, or humiliation. Left unexamined, that alarm becomes paralyzing. It stops motion before it begins. It convinces the body that retreat is safer than progress, even though progress is the only path forward. The fear-setting technique breaks that cycle. It does not erase fear, but it dismantles the vagueness that makes fear overwhelming, converting what feels like catastrophe into a structured challenge that can be prepared for, managed, and ultimately used as fuel for action. The first shift comes from forcing fear into the open. When you feel hesitation tightening your chest, when anxiety floods the imagination with worst-case images, do not let it remain undefined. Write down, in precise detail, exactly what you are afraid of. Not in broad, abstract strokes, but in sentences that corner the fear until it can no longer hide in ambiguity. Fear of failure must be described in terms of what that failure would look like. Fear of judgment must be described in terms of who would judge and what they might actually say. Fear of financial loss must be translated into numbers and consequences that can be measured. The act of definition shrinks fear. It removes the fog and leaves you with facts. Most people never take this step. They live with an invisible weight pressing against their choices, but because they never sit with pen and paper and force themselves to name the threat, that weight multiplies until even small decisions feel suffocating. The brain has a cruel tendency. What is undefined, it makes infinite, and what is infinite, it makes unbearable. But the instant fear is pinned down into sentences, its dominance weakens. A sentence can be examined, a sentence can be tested, A sentence can be disproven. Fear loses its authority the moment you stop letting it drift in imagination and start letting it sit under inspection. Once the fear is defined, the next step is to confront the worst case with accuracy. This is where the mind resists most strongly because imagining catastrophe feels like inviting it closer. But the truth is the opposite. When catastrophe is unexamined, it grows larger than life. When it is broken down, it becomes survivable. If you fear failing at a venture, sketch the reality. What happens if it fails? Perhaps you lose savings. Perhaps you endure criticism. Perhaps you carry the sting of embarrassment. All painful, yes. But notice how every one of them has a time horizon. Embarrassment fades. Money can be replenished. Criticism dulls with time. You realize that fear had convinced you of permanent ruin when the reality is temporary setback. The brain is wired to exaggerate the unknown because exaggeration kept our ancestors alive. It was safer to assume the rustle in the bushes was a predator than to take the chance. But in modern life, the same instinct works against growth. Most predators are not predators. They are conversations, decisions, ambitions, and risks that will not kill you, but will shape you. The worst case is rarely lethal, and when you describe it in real terms, you discover that survival is almost guaranteed. That discovery alone is enough to weaken the paralysis that keeps you trapped. Yet fear setting is not satisfied with merely surviving the worst case. It asks for a defense. If the worst could happen, what can you do now to lower the odds? Preparation becomes your weapon. Imagine the fear as a chess opponent. What moves could you make in advance to limit its options? If you fear losing credibility, can you prepare by learning more, practicing longer, or rehearsing until competence is undeniable? If you fear financial collapse, can you build reserves, cut expenses, or create fallback income? If you fear rejection, can you remind yourself of past resilience, strengthen your self-concept, and prepare the words you will use if no comes? Every preventive step you identify turns helplessness into control. Preparation is not only about logistics, it is about identity. Every time you prepare against fear, you teach yourself that you are not a victim of circumstance. You are an architect of resilience. The mind shifts from imagining disaster to rehearsing protection, and that shift alone reduces anxiety. Fear thrives when you feel powerless. It weakens when you prove, even in small measures, that you can take responsibility before disaster strikes. But no amount of defense eliminates risk. Sometimes the worst will happen. That is why the next step in fear setting is to design recovery. This is the part most people never allow themselves to consider because they believe even imagining failure makes it inevitable. In truth, avoiding the thought of recovery only magnifies the terror. If you refuse to imagine what you would do after failure, your brain concludes that nothing could be done, and so the fear doubles in power. The antidote is to write recovery with the same detail you wrote fear. If the venture fails, what is your first move the next morning? If the relationship ends, how will you care for yourself and rebuild? If the criticism comes, who will you call? What will you remind yourself of? How will you redirect your focus? Recovery planning proves to the nervous system that the story does not end in disaster. It continues into adaptation. This step is transformative. Fear draws its strength from permanence, the illusion that once you fall, you will never rise again. Recovery writing exposes that illusion. You realize that even in the worst, life bends, but it does not break. You realize that you can lose money and make more. You can lose reputation and earn it back. You can stumble and yet walk again, often stronger because you have endured. Suddenly, the risk you feared is no longer absolute. It is a trial, survivable and temporary. That knowledge is power. The final piece of fear setting is the cost of inaction. This is the piece almost everyone avoids because inaction feels like safety. But what is the price of refusing the leap? What does it cost you to stay where you are? When you measure this honestly, the truth hits harder than the worst-case scenario ever could. Inaction steals time, years wasted in hesitation. It steals growth, skills never learned, resilience never built. It steals identity because the self you could have become dies each time you surrender to paralysis. Fear convinces you that action is dangerous, but the real danger is stagnation. You can recover from failure. You cannot recover the time lost to cowardice. Fear setting, then, is not just a technique. It is a reorientation of your relationship to fear itself. You are not waiting for fear to vanish before you move. You are moving because you know what fear actually is: a signal, not a stop sign. You are dismantling its illusions, examining its teeth, and proving to yourself that even if it bites, you will survive. When practiced regularly, fear setting creates a new identity. You stop being the person who waits for courage and become the person who creates it. Fear does not disappear. It still whispers at every threshold, but you stop mistaking that whisper for a command. You hear it, you analyze it, you prepare for it, and you walk forward anyway. And here lies the deepest power: repetition. Every time you run through this process, the brain rewires. The fear feels less catastrophic. The body reacts less violently. The hesitation dissolves more quickly. Fear becomes familiar terrain, and familiarity breeds confidence. What once froze you now sharpens you. What once made you retreat now directs you. Fear becomes your compass, pointing toward the work that matters most. The man or woman who practices fear setting does not live a fearless life. They live a fearless practice. Fear arrives, but instead of obeying it, they sit with it, dissect it, write it, map it, and move beyond it, again and again. And over time, this becomes second nature. Action replaces paralysis. Courage replaces hesitation. Growth replaces stagnation. That is the truth. Fear will never vanish, but paralysis can. And fear setting is the bridge. Fear will never vanish, but its grip can dissolve the moment you stop letting it dictate the limits of your life. The fear-setting technique strips away its disguise, showing you that the monster in the dark is often just a shadow waiting to be examined. Once you confront it, map it, prepare against it, and design your recovery beyond it, you realize something liberating. Fear was never the problem. The real problem was believing it had the final word. From this point forward, every time fear rises, you will know exactly what to do: define it, dissect it, diminish it, and move through it. The choice is not between fear and no fear. The choice is between paralysis and progress. And now you carry the tool that ensures fear no longer commands you, but instead reveals exactly where your next step must be. Chapter 10. Momentum Mechanics. Small wins trigger big results. Momentum is the hidden current beneath all achievement. It does not arrive in a flash of brilliance or in one massive surge of effort. It is built quietly, step by step, through actions so small they are easy to dismiss. The danger is that most people never give those small wins their due. They wait for the breakthrough, for the moment of inspiration, for the grand gesture that will change everything. But momentum does not come from waiting. It comes from motion. The smallest action is the spark. Writing one paragraph, completing one set, sending one message. On its own, it seems trivial, but in the nervous system, it registers as progress. That signal matters more than motivation. Progress tells the brain that movement is possible, that resistance is beatable, that continuation is easier than stopping. Once the first spark is lit, the system begins to accelerate. The brain is not wired to reward the idea of effort. It is wired to reward the evidence of effort. That is why small actions hold such disproportionate power. They act as proof. They quiet the voice of doubt and replace it with the voice of certainty. I am capable. This proof is the engine of momentum because the brain begins to crave the feeling of completion, and craving fuels repetition. Momentum strengthens through recognition. Every completed task, no matter how modest, needs to be acknowledged, not with fanfare, but with awareness. Crossing the line, checking the box, logging the step, these small acknowledgments trigger the brain's reward circuits. Dopamine is released, confidence rises, and the next action feels less heavy. Ignoring the small win is a mistake. Recognizing it multiplies the energy for the next one. Momentum thrives on sequence. One task should lead directly into another. Finish a warm-up, step into the workout. Write the outline, then expand into the draft. Small victories are not meant to stand alone. They are meant to connect, each reducing friction for what follows. A single action is fragile. A chain of actions is strong. The brain begins to expect continuation, and continuation becomes natural. The real mastery of momentum lies in designing these chains. If you stop after one step, you must start again tomorrow from zero. If you link today's effort to tomorrow's, momentum carries over, reducing the cost of beginning. The sequence becomes a living thing, a rhythm that grows easier with every repetition. Chains built carefully become difficult to break because the weight of past effort pushes you forward when today's willpower feels light. High-leverage microtasks accelerate momentum further. Not every step has equal weight. Some small wins unlock doors to larger progress. Sending one proposal may move an entire project. Clearing one email may open the mental space for creative work. Choosing the right first action creates disproportionate momentum, magnifying the return on effort and pulling larger tasks into motion with less resistance. Momentum demands consistency, not intensity. Too many people rely on occasional bursts of effort, one heroic sprint followed by long collapse. That is not momentum. That is exhaustion. True momentum is a rhythm, steady, repeatable, reliable. 10 minutes a day outperforms 2 hours once a week because momentum thrives on continuity. The brain adapts to predictable patterns, associating certain times, places, or cues with forward movement. What begins as discipline becomes automatic, and what becomes automatic sustains itself even on the days when motivation is nowhere to be found. To keep momentum alive, friction must be removed ruthlessly. Resistance, whether it takes the form of clutter, distraction, or indecision, bleeds energy and interrupts the flow. Streamline everything. Prepare your environment so that the easiest choice is the right one. Put workout clothes by the bed. Set your tools out the night before. Silence the notifications that would pull you into delay. Every barrier removed is fuel preserved for progress, and every act of simplification makes momentum more difficult to break. Momentum is strengthened when progress is made visible. The human brain trusts what it can see. A chart that climbs, a checklist that fills, a log that grows longer each day turns invisible effort into undeniable evidence. Even when the wins are modest, seeing them stack creates excitement and conviction. That visual proof tells the mind, this is working. Keep going. Without visibility, momentum slips into the shadows and feels like it has vanished. With it, the compounding effect becomes impossible to ignore. Momentum is also a shield against resistance. Once the system is moving, it becomes harder for avoidance to interrupt. Think of a heavy wheel. At rest, it takes enormous effort to move. But once spinning, only a small push keeps it alive. Momentum turns discipline into leverage. Tasks that once required full effort begin to feel lighter because you are carried forward by the weight of prior action. This is why maintaining momentum matters more than starting from scratch. Starting from stillness is always the hardest part. As momentum grows, the scale of challenge can grow with it. Early wins build confidence, and confidence reduces fear. What once seemed intimidating now feels like the natural next step. That is how momentum transforms not just productivity, but identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles to begin and begin to see yourself as someone who finishes, someone who grows, someone who moves. And that identity shift is where the deepest results emerge. But momentum is fragile. Interruptions, setbacks, and failures can derail it if unprepared. Anticipation is protection. Know that disruptions will come and decide in advance how you will respond. A missed workout is not the end of a routine. It is simply a pause. A broken streak is not a collapse. It is an invitation to begin again. Momentum is preserved not by perfection, but by resilience, by refusing to let a stumble turn into a stop. Momentum multiplies when it is layered across different areas of life. Progress at work builds confidence that spills into fitness. Growth in fitness energizes learning. Momentum in learning sharpens relationships. Success in one domain is not confined. It cascades, lifting everything else with it. This holistic acceleration creates an upward spiral where wins in one area make wins in another feel easier, and soon life itself feels like it is gathering speed in your favor. Reflection cements momentum. Each small win should end with a pause. What worked? What changed? What can repeat? Reflection turns raw action into refined knowledge. It cements the connection between effort and growth, ensuring the system strengthens with every cycle. Without reflection, momentum leaks. With it, momentum deepens. And as momentum deepens, the key is challenge. If you keep doing only what is easy, momentum stalls. Incremental escalation, slightly harder goals, slightly more complex problems, slightly higher stakes ensures momentum remains alive. The system thrives when it grows, and growth requires discomfort. By stepping into challenges that are just beyond your current capacity, you ensure that the invisible force pulling you forward never weakens. but instead intensifies. Momentum is not fragile when it is cultivated properly. It becomes durable. Once you learn to create it, it belongs to you. You can rebuild it after setbacks. You can restart it after pauses. You can transfer it from one domain to another. The wheel may slow, but it never forgets how to spin. And with every cycle you master, you discover that momentum is not just a tool for productivity. It is a philosophy of movement. Momentum, at its core, is the transformation of the ordinary into the extraordinary. One action becomes a pattern. One pattern becomes a habit. One habit becomes an identity. The person who once struggled to begin becomes the person who cannot imagine stopping. That is the true mechanic of momentum, not force, but continuation. Not one heroic burst, but a rhythm that compounds until results appear inevitable. Small wins are not small. They are the seeds of the force that makes everything else possible. Protect them. Celebrate them. Chain them together. Momentum is built in silence, but once it gathers, it is unstoppable. Momentum does not beg for your permission. It waits for the smallest proof that you are willing to move, and once it has that proof, it carries you further than effort alone ever could. By now you know momentum is not magic. It is mechanics. And mechanics can be built, protected, and multiplied. Each small win you stack is not just a task finished. It is a current that gathers strength, turning hesitation into flow, and flow into acceleration. The question that remains is simple. Will you let the spark fade, or will you guard it, feed it, and allow it to grow until stopping feels harder than continuing? You've reached the final words of this journey, but the real work begins now, in the choices you make the moment this audiobook ends. How to force yourself to do hard things was never just a collection of ideas. It was an invitation to rise above hesitation, to silence the quiet pull of procrastination, and to build a life that reflects not only what you dream about, but what you actually do. I want to thank you deeply for giving your time, your focus, and your trust to these words. Every hour you've invested in listening has been an act of courage, a declaration that you refuse to settle for less than the strength you know you carry inside. On behalf of Book Sounds Better You, I want you to know your presence here matters. Your decision to listen all the way through proves you are ready for more. Now comes the call. Not to think, not to plan, but to act. Take one tool, one insight, one shift in perspective, and put it into motion today. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but now. Because action is where change begins, and consistency is where transformation takes root. Every step you take, no matter how small, is a promise to yourself that you will not give up, and you will not wait for life to hand you permission. Carry this truth with you. The strength to do hard things has always lived within you. This book only gave it a voice. Now let that voice become action. Build the momentum, claim the discipline, and create the results that will remind you every single day that you are capable of far more than you once believed. Thank you again for walking this path with me. My wish for you is simple, but it is everything. May you move forward with courage. May your effort bear fruit, and may the life you build reflect the very best of who you are becoming. Go and live it fully. Go and live it bravely. And above all, go and live it on your own terms.